To the next question, how can you cut it? We're doing this for you guys that we can keep afloat. Faisal, can you describe the impact on your family and homes lost in Gaza? I know you mentioned it a little bit in your introduction. And the long-term effects on Palestinians of Palestine and of the diaspora, i.e. long-term trauma, children, the extended rebuilding process with no promise of an enduring peace. And you have 4 minutes for this question.
Yeah, it's catastrophic. You know, we have other people from Gaza who are sitting in the crowd right now with family members from Gaza. People have moved 3, 4, 5, 6 times because of intense bombings, because of, you know, the lack of safety, because of the lack of a shelter. Gaza's skies are 24/7 occupied. You know, we hear F-16s here in Fresno all the time, and those things are loud, but we hear them passing by. In Gaza, that's a 24-hour thing, yet the only difference is, over there, they drop bombs. Israel uses a sneaky tactic of doing the most intense bombings at night, because there hasn't been electricity in Gaza for 11 months. You know, if you talk to anybody from Gaza nowadays, it is the most awkward conversation you could ever have. You don't know what to say, and they don't know what to tell you. The suffering is so extensive, that nobody has any words to describe it anymore. We have a generation, Gaza is full of kids, Gaza is full of children. We have a generation that has spent 11 months in a genocide. And you know, one of the panelists here spoke how the Holocaust has affected generations because of how severe things were. Gaza children, what they're going through right now, are you going to be able to help them? Do you think it's going to be easy to take that trauma out of that child? What Gaza has been going through for 11 months is unprecedented. The amount of bombing that Gaza has been going through is unheard of. 80,000 pounds of bombs have been dropped into Gaza. That has not happened to any city during World War II. What you guys need to understand is, a catastrophe has already been created. We're 11 months into a catastrophe. And we need to find a way to make it stop, because a lot of lives depend on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Faisal. My next question is for Antonio. Antonio, you have 3 minutes. Can you share with our crowd today what it means for indigenous peoples here in this land to connect with and stand in solidarity with all other indigenous peoples and their movements?
Yes, thank you, Reza. And as I was saying in my introduction of how, as a Chicano indígena, you know, the evolution, you know, before your eyes indeed, and there's our peoples in Fresno. And even as I grew up after coming back from Vietnam, I had to meet with my own people to understand what was going on in the movement. But as Chicanos, then we were involved in international solidarity struggles, even in the 70s, you know, with the overthrow in Guatemala that happened there, and the overthrow in Chile, and then immediately these wars in rapid succession going on all throughout the world. In fact, there's over 100 conflicts going on and more around the world. But our learning of these struggles, including in Iran and Tehran, and during the hostage taking back in 77, 78, and on through that, you know, we learned these struggles. As Chicanos from Fresno and the Valley have gone to Cuba in the Venceremos Brigade in 68, and has been involved in El Salvador, in the struggle in El Salvador, their civil rights, have been involved in Nicaragua and their revolution and civil war they're my relatives. So as Chicanos, we've gone through a awakening, a consciousness and political awakening, and strategizing where we fit in as 40 million Latinos of this here in the Southwest and the U.S., because the world community knows who we are as Chicanos, knew who we were as Chicanos, and we are the largest minority indeed in the entire Western Hemisphere, the largest of peoples, and we have a strong economic base. We are still struggling for self-determination, and that is to determine our economy, and to determine our education, and how we're going to proceed from there in line with the other international movements. So myself, in the American Indian movement, it's intertribal. It welcomed Chicanos, and through the American Indian movement as a spiritual movement, because that's what it is, a spiritual movement, have been working hand in hand with the Chicanos and vice versa. We're learning together of our indigenousness. My work at the international arena includes the completion of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the World's Indigenous Peoples. This was adopted by the General Assembly in 2010, and 4 countries did not sign it at first. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States was the last country to sign this Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that I helped be a part of engineering 35 years of that work in the international arena. And Article 6 of the 46 articles in that Declaration on the Rights of the World's Indigenous Peoples refers to self-determination. Indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination. We see the Palestinians as indigenous peoples to their land. Indeed, we say we are the Palestinians of North America, and they are the indigenous peoples of Palestine.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, we've had great wins. We've had large numbers show up to protests and events and city council and hounding people towards sympathizing and, stopping the weapons supply and cutting the funding to Israel. We've had great wins. But those numbers are dying down. Our protest at the beginning of that happens every Saturday, at the beginning of this genocide, we used to get a couple of hundred. Now we're lucky if we get to 30. I know people get tired. I know life gets through things. I know, sometimes you see stuff that you don't like and you're like, you know what, I'm not going to go to the protest because of this or that. That genocide is so much bigger than any of what you went through, no offense. What I'm trying to tell you here is when we had a lot of pressure, when we made a lot of pressure, we were getting somewhere. Zena talked about the new military operation that's happening in the West Bank. And Janine, do you know how Israel started? They cut off the electricity and water from hospitals. You know why they did that? Because they did it in Gaza and they were like, oh, we're able to do that. They torched down a Shifa hospital. After they left that place, Palestinians found mass graves. Do you understand what it's like to find mass graves in the 21st century? And then our White House comes out and says, oh, we're investigating. They've taken us and replaced us with these empty vessels that are incapable of changing any policy. 11 months! So, our response was good initially, but now, we're not doing enough. There's a genocide going on. 40,000 Palestinians dead. 17,000 children dead. A few hundred babies that were born died during this war. I don't necessarily think that people should either go to protests or come to these events or whatever, but you should do something. Find something and do it. And if you're not doing anything right now, you're failing Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. Joshua, Dr. Joshua, can you summarize the relevant laws and protocols that provide the legal framework for a campaign to end the shipment of weapons to Israel? 3 minutes.
Well, as many of us probably know, the Israeli regime is only able to get away with this and to enjoy this impunity because the U.S. sends them weapons and munitions unconditionally. My own doctoral dissertation looked at U.S. military aid relationships and the conditions placed on it, and looked at a different part of the world in East and Central Africa. But I can tell you, the U.S. has a bad track record of arming regimes that violate human rights. That's no secret. That's been the case for a very long time. But there still have always been some minimum standards. The U.S. constantly violates the spirit of many of these laws, but they're careful to take a little action so that they're not technically violating the spirit. The letter of the law. So they violate the spirit, but not the letter of the law. But with Israel, it's a very different circumstance. There have been no conditions, no limitations placed on any of this aid. And this is in the face of some of the most brutal and depraved acts imaginable. And it's so well documented. But yeah, so make no mistake, this is 100% a clear violation of many laws. It's not a question, and many of these laws have overlapping scopes, legally speaking. So just to run down what some of these are, we've got the conventional arms transfer policy, which is a federal policy prohibiting U.S. weapons transfers that will be used to breach the Geneva Conventions. You got the Foreign Assistance Act, which forbids military assistance going to governments that engage in human rights violations. You got the Arms Export Control Act, which says that countries that receive U.S. military aid can only use this weaponry for legitimate self-defense and internal security. It's long been established by international law. The Israelis are an occupying force, and by definition, the worst of their actions are not defensive. So that's a clear violation. You've got the U.S. War Crimes Act, forbidding, again, weapons transfers that facilitate specific war crimes. So the law is crystal clear. And then perhaps most famously, you've got what are called the Leahy laws, or the Leahy Amendment, which prohibits providing military aid to specific specific military and security forces units in foreign militaries where there's credible evidence of human rights violations. And then finally, you've got the Genocide Convention Implementation Act, which implements our obligations under the Genocide Convention. And so all of this is to say there's no denying what's going on. The violations are clear. The U.S. is engaging in clear criminal actions. It's not just members of the military who are speaking out. We've had high-profile resignations, for example, from within the State Department and other various federal agencies that see that this is clear-cut criminality. And so that legal framework, for this campaign does exist. It's just a matter of following through. When that spigot of lethal aid is turned off, this genocide runs out of gas, and that's the only thing keeping this going is the sort of might makes right mentality that the U.S. pushes throughout the world. So it's that global predominance of U.S. military and economic power that's the linchpin. And so that needs to be the thing we go after. So a lot of work needs to be done in terms of movement building to facilitate that. But like I said, the legal framework is there.
Thank you, Joshua. Our next question is for Antonio. Antonio, what kind of movement building can be done on an international scale to halt weapons manufacturing and sales to states such as Israel, which is systematically using them to oppress people and even commit genocide and ethnic cleansing. You have 4 minutes.
Well, thank you. And to the question, indeed we have a formidable challenge ahead of us, as my brother, the doctor, was alluding to the military industry and the strength of the military, which is should be a primary focus for us as a peoples. And there are well over 800 U.S. military bases around the world. The United States having 3 times, 4 times, 5 times the largest military budget in the world, far surpassing even the UK or even China. So it's a formidable struggle there, my relatives. And humanitarian law, international law, is in shambles, my relatives. We recently heard in July the decision rendered by the International Court of Justice about the violations that the Israelis have incurred, including violation of further settlements in the area there, and still these violations occur. So alliance building, coalition building, as we move forward, as we do in the American Indian movement in our struggles, we try to bring everybody on board here at the home bases, protecting sacred sites and like that. But it's coalition building, alliance building, and also the boycotts, for example, the boycott, divestment, and the sanctions movement is having an impact. So as a people, we should become more aware of the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, and advocate for that, strengthen that. Also, the exposing people who talk one way and act another. Like sometimes we hear about Senator Alex Padilla. He's so good on this and that, but he hasn't said anything about ceasefire in Palestine. So we have to scrutinize people like that. Even countries is the #1 European country in Europe that is first on recognizing Palestinian rights, even statehood for Palestine. But it was just discovered, exposed, that Ireland has a multinational business corporation there, Etsy, I believe it's called. Etsy, and they do like Airbnbs and home economies, and they are the financial accountants for the Israeli settlements in the rural areas there in Israel, and they're providing the means for that to exist. So that has to get shut off. Also, another boycott and has worked, and that is the AXA. Multinational financial company that runs on insurance possibilities. They have been, through the movement of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, they have pulled out of Israel. So they are no longer providing the financial accountability to Israel and like that. So these movements are very important for us to get involved in, and particularly for the Chicano peoples to educate ourselves, know more about these struggles, and get involved and be a part of the march, because it's only us out on the streets that can make the difference. Thank you.
And our final crafted question of the evening is for Zaina. Zaina, how do you feel about the response of both the Fresno community and the national scene in the ongoing genocide of Palestine? 3 minutes.
it is a mix of emotions. For Fresno specifically, I'm very proud of us in a lot of ways. We did so much that really surprised me, honestly. People came together, they had conversations, we had multiple organizing meetings, people were getting groups together for phone banking for our local reps. We had a whole campaign against Jim Costa, we raised the flag, a group got multiple ceasefire resolutions in the Valley passed, which is huge, and thank you to everyone that worked on that. Yes, seriously important. And we've also been protesting almost every single Saturday and now Wednesday for nearly a year. Those are big feats and not easy to do in a city that doesn't necessarily support progressive politics, especially progressive Palestinian politics. And on the national front, I'm extremely proud too of all the efforts that I've seen the Palestinian youth movement do, Al-Auda, the BDS movement. They have boycott, divestment, and sanctions. They have large campaigns that they're working on, but then it's also sparked the populace to create their own BDS campaigns, like against Starbucks or McDonald's. These are big, big things, and places like Starbucks, their economy is tanking because of BDS. And like he was saying, BDS is extremely important, and I was going to talk about that a little bit. It was one big reason why apartheid in South Africa ended, for the most part. I mean, there's still a lot of issues there as well, but it made huge advances in South Africa, and there are lots of BDS campaigns going on right now that we can still be a part of to make a big difference. So on one end, I'm very proud, and then on the other end, like Faisal, I see some of the support waning, and I see people getting tired, and I see people getting scared. And I understand, I've felt a lot of those things as well, but also like Faisal, none of my feelings will ever compare to seeing a kid's limbs get blown off or a mass grave being found. So some ways that you can get involved, like I said, even these small communities are so important. First, you can educate yourself. Go read The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Papp. Read The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. If you like fiction that contextualizes the occupation, you can read Mornings in Jenin, Salt Houses, there's a book club happening. If you like documentaries and you want to learn more about the women's movement, you can watch Naila and the Uprising. If you're very new to this, you can watch Occupation 101. Join the protests. There's one on Wednesday by Raza for Gaza at 11 to 1 and 2500 Tulare Street every Wednesday. There's the same one on Blackstone and Knees from 6 to 8 every Saturday. Join the BDS movement personally. You can get apps like the No Thanks app or the Boycott or Bidnash app to tell you what not to buy. The money goes to Israel. We can form BDS campaigns here. We can find a local vendor, like Trader Joe's, for instance, right, where they're selling Israeli za'atar, for example. We can be out there every Saturday educating people that are walking into Trader Joe's, that what they're buying is going towards the ethnic cleansing of Palestine and the genocide of Gaza. And you can pressure your local representatives as well, like Seth was talking about. So thank you very much.
So let's give a larger, more loud and thunderous round of applause for all of the panelists this evening. But we're not done yet. We're not done.